Hey everybody, this is Blake here, and welcome to my review of I, Frankenstein. Now, when I first saw the trailer for this movie back in October of 2013, I was immediately sold on it. When your movie includes Frankenstein kicking gargoyle and demon asses in modern-day society, you've immediately won me over, and it doesn't even matter if the film itself doesn't look very good. And make no mistake, I, Frankenstein, never looked like it was going to be any good. Just based on the trailer, the acting, the dialogue, the special effects, and even the way it was edited just seemed off to me, and that suggested that I, Frankenstein would probably turn out to be a pretty crummy film in the long run. But that wasn't going to get in the way of my excitement. I am a sucker for films with strange and kind of bizarre premises, which I, Frankenstein, had, and it's the type of thing that I like discussing with other people, and because the idea seems so fun to me. But I want to remind you, a few weeks ago, or I guess it was maybe a month ago, I watched 47 Ronin, and I said that that film had a similar background for me. I knew it was going to suck from the very beginning, but at the same time, everything about it just seemed so daft and strange that I was sure that would at least be entertaining, even if it was for the wrong reasons. And that excitement stayed with me all the way up until I got into the theaters, sat down, and started to watch the movie, in which all sense of fun was devoured by awful filmmaking. So I figured I, Frankenstein, would follow a similar path, that I would look forward to seeing it until I actually saw it, and in which the film would just be kind of bad, and I would suddenly be really annoyed and disappointed because the film was never entertainingly bad. But then something happened, something that I wasn't expecting, and let me remind you that I first saw the trailer for this back in October of 2013 when it was first released. And I go to the movies once or twice every week without fail. So pretty much every time I'd go to the theaters, I would see that same stupid trailer over and over again, to such an extent to where I started to get sick of this project. By the time the release date had finally come, I was glad that it was finally coming out, just so I'd never have to see that trailer again. The distributors had forced this film down my throat so much to where what I thought would be a fun time, at least going into the theaters, I was actually beginning to dread watching it because I was just so burnt out on the project. And so when it was finally coming out, I decided that I wouldn't see it unless there was nothing else being released at that same time that even marginally caught my interest. And since I, Frankenstein, pretty much came out alone, I figured, shit, I gotta man up and actually watch the film now. So I went to the theaters, sat down, and once again, the excitement was totally gone by that point. I was just sick and tired of hearing about I, Frankenstein, and I knew the reviews weren't very good either, but once again, I expected that from the beginning, so I sat down and started watching it, and describing this movie is going to be difficult. I've constantly tried to do this vlog since Saturday, but then various events that I'll talk about later kind of got in the way of that. Then I tried filming it on Sunday. I kept botching it, and I've tried to film it multiple times today, and I kept botching this video. And I've just come to the conclusion that this is not an easy movie to talk about. My opinions are often very contradictory in regards to I, Frankenstein, and this is one of those cases where I do think that you should read my written review because that's just going to be more organized. So while I was watching this film, nothing bad was really jumping out at me. I made sure to leave my brain outside of the theater, so I didn't really think about it. I was just hoping to get a little bit of entertainment value here, but I wasn't really getting that either. I was just thinking that this film was really kind of mediocre and flat. Nothing especially awful, but nothing especially impressive either. So throughout my viewing, I could tolerate it, but I wasn't really enjoying it. So I was figuring, do I want to give it a 2-star rating because it's not that bad, or do I want to give it 1.5 stars because even though it's not that bad, I didn't really like it. But then as soon as I collected my brain, suddenly the badness of this film just washed over me. And I realized that, yes, I had witnessed a piece of shit unfold on the screen. The only difference between this and, let's say, The Legend of Hercules or 47 Ronin is those films were very obvious when it came to their badness. This movie was never as blatant. For the most part, what you will notice while watching it is just how average it is. The bad parts don't really come into play until later when you actually start really thinking about it. So I got my notes out so I can discuss this movie step by step, and I'll explain all of its problems and its strengths if it has any. Okay, so the special effects were really panned by the critics, and honestly I never thought the CGI was that bad. It looked like at times they put more money into the CGI just so they could use it for the trailers. So the supposedly cool shots, the CGI was fine. I was never that blown away by it, but I thought it was convincing enough to where I could suspend disbelief and just presume, hey, those are gargoyles flying around. But then there are other times where, yeah, the CGI just looks too much like CGI. Still a step up above 47 Ronin or The Legend of Hercules. The CGI was never that awful, but when it's off, it's not very good either. What really did capture my interest was the awkward makeup effects. So the demons have these transformations where they become just a demon, and at times I kept thinking that it looked like it belonged in a television show. Like the makeup effects would have been perfectly at home in, let's say, Buffy, where the production values aren't supposed to be as impressive as film's production values. But then there are other times where, yeah, the makeup effects were kind of menacing looking. But then at times the lighting would really betray the makeup, because it would start to make it look like plastic. I thought it was strange how the light would bounce off it, and it made the makeup effects look incredibly phony. And I made a joke to my dad that it's like they were wearing the coolest looking Halloween masks, which I'm pretty sure was not the effect. So yeah, the special effects overall, they weren't terrible, but they weren't very good either. And for a film that's really emphasizing the spectacle, the effects had to be a lot better than they ultimately were. That's what they should have gone. They should have put more money into making these effects look awesome, or at least give it a slicker design or something. But whatever it was, the special effects did not impress me, which is obviously going to be a major problem for a movie that relied so much on the special effects. The visual style overall was pretty the problem is that they have this blue filter that they use throughout the entire movie, what the Underworld franchise did, and I wasn't a big fan of that either. And for some reason, that became a major trend for these past few years, was to use these blue filters, so everything just has this kind of bluish look. And to me, it's just, I don't know, it just looks so boring and makes the scenery seem so bland. And this film in general is very colorless and grim. The tone is another issue when it comes to the film's, I guess I'll say, atmosphere. It's taking itself way too seriously. It's very tragic and dark. When you're dealing with a movie with a premise like this, though, you should be having more fun with the concept. Be silly, even be a little campy. But this attempt to be Batman just made it kind of boring. And the action scenes, I will say that at first I was impressed. There was a lot of effort put into the choreography, and I was surprised at how well Aaron Eckhart really handled himself when it came to delivering the action scenes. They were first very exciting, very stylish, and just cool to look at. The problem was there's no diversity among the fight scenes, so you start to feel like you're seeing the same fight over and over again throughout the rest of the movie. So it's cool for the first 30 minutes or so, but then after that, I don't know, when you feel like you're seeing the same thing over and over again, the fights just start to lose their impact. They seem kind of flat and lifeless, like, well, the trailers, how they kept reusing that same trailer over and over again. Well, in the actual film, they just seem like they keep reusing the same fights and the same shots, so that immediately lost its appeal to me. But the main problem I have with this movie is the pacing. Okay, so I've explained this many times before, but fast-paced does not automatically equal entertaining, as slow-paced does not automatically equal boring. Yeah, slow-paced, when your film is slow-paced, that's because they're usually emphasizing the story, the characters, the atmosphere. Whereas when it's fast-paced, you're emphasizing the excitement, the intensity. And this film is incredibly fast-paced. Now that should be a good thing for a shallow viewer like myself, but it's not. It moves so fast-paced and never takes us time to stop and just let the audience breathe. So by the 40-minute point, I was feeling exhausted, like the film had already reached its climax, even though it was only halfway through. So that is a major issue with me. For films that they think that they're going to draw in younger viewers who are very scatterbrained, by just giving us a nonstop stream of action, but eventually that's just going to become kind of tiresome, and the audience, the same audience it's trying to appeal to, is just going to get bored, and that's ultimately what started to happen with me. But it's not just the pacing in itself, even though that is obviously a major problem, but the pacing has a negative effect on the story and the characters. Now, you might immediately think, well, yeah, this is a dumb action film. It's obviously not going to be very strong when it comes to the characters or the story. But believe it or not, there is a way to do this. The Expendables, for example, is kind of a brainless action film, but it knew that, and it ended up utilizing its limitations, in my opinion, effectively, to where it gave its target audience exactly what they wanted and nothing more. But the point is, you have to plan your movie in advance. It really does feel like at some point, I, Frankenstein, was going to be a much more different movie. A movie that would be like, well, Underworld, perhaps, where there was a major emphasis on the characters and their situations and their dilemmas. But over time, whether in the pre-production stage or maybe all this footage was left on the editing room floor, they changed it and decided to make just where it was just going to be non-stop action. There are slivers of story, slivers of development, and slivers that this was probably once a much cooler movie, but the final result actually feels worse because of that. So, for example, on the story, there's this whole deal where Adam, who is Frankenstein's monster, does he have a soul or doesn't he? Everybody says he doesn't, and that's sort of one of his major arcs. And it's revealed after a certain point that no, he does not have a soul. Where the film suddenly changes its mind during the very ending and then reveals that yes, he does have a soul. The problem is that it totally contradicted a previous event where Frankenstein not having a soul pretty much resolved a certain character's or a character's fate. Now, the implication is that God may have had something to do with that. It's a lot like how Constantine with Keanu Reeves, how Constantine is going to go to hell, but then because he redeems himself, he finally he finds his salvation in that. Well, the difference is that movie built to that much more. They made God a major presence within that story, and they did a good job at playing out that arc, I thought, even though the film itself wasn't anything special. But here, God isn't really playing any kind of role in the story. Even though the gargoyles are supposed to be like angels, they never, other than a few lines like how God's no longer the only creator of man and stuff like that, and the gargoyle queen is constantly praying, but God himself just doesn't really play a major part in the story, so the revelation that Adam has a soul just kind of feels like an ass pull. And if this was a film that emphasized story and character, I'm sure they would have done a much better job, fleshing that idea out, where, it does deal with God and stuff like that. There's also some unintentionally amusing moments, too, like there's a few major action scenes in the city. Well, if you look carefully, there doesn't appear to be any civilians in the city. They're just totally empty, other than the gargoyles and the demons. Now, once again, if they emphasized the story more, maybe they would have explained that. Maybe humans can't see the gargoyles or the demons, or maybe they did something to evacuate the humans. Who knows? Or maybe they even did mention that they had some power to where they're invisible to mortals, but it was just so rushly delivered that it was easy to miss, which obviously I would have done if that is the case. So that was the major issue with the story, and then otherwise it's just kind of, there's a lot going on, but the way that it uses its various subplots just don't really feel necessary. Like, what's his name? Courtney Jai, or Jai Courtney. He's the guy from Jack Reacher and A Good Day to Die Hard. He plays an angel who doesn't really like Adam, and so you're expecting some sort of confrontation there, and they do eventually collide, but the way it went down just, I don't know, you really feel like you don't understand the characters very well, especially in that case, because the film was very inconsistent when it comes to whether that character was supposed to be likable or not, or if he was supposed to be just really complex. There are things about him you do like he is very dedicated to his job, and he is in many ways very courageous, but he's also a total dick to Adam. So it's like the film couldn't really make up its mind as to whether we were supposed to sympathize with him or not. And when the film does finally make a decision, even then it continues going on to where I wasn't really sure what I was supposed to feel about that person. And in general, the characters' decisions just feel like they're done to drive the story, even if they don't really mesh with what we know of those characters based on early scenes. So that was, once again, if the film focused more on story and character, those decisions might have made more sense because we would have understood them much more, but they don't. But the biggest victim of this is Adam himself, Frankenstein's monster. If this movie was planned to just be a brainless action flick, they would have made him a boring, invincible hero who just was a prop to deliver awesome action scenes. You know, he was supposed to be cool, and you know, when he carries those two weapons, you know, he just looks awesome while doing so. Van Helsing, for example, was a brainless action flick that did that reasonably well, where Van Helsing, the character, was kind of boring, but he's supposed to be really cool, and that's really why we watch him. The problem with this, in this case, they actually do try to make him, I don't want to say multi-layered character, but there is more to him than just being a generic invincible hero. But it really backfires because the attempts at giving this character depth and humanity end up making him come across as kind of a pussy. So, like, when he's on top of things, when he's, when other characters are forced to do what he wants, or if he's overpowering somebody, he'll be as awesome as you'd expect him to be. But then when he's suddenly overpowered and defeated, or about to be killed, or chained up, he starts becoming kind of a whiny little bitch. He's like, no, please no, and he starts begging, and at no point are you ever supposed to feel like, he's trying to trick them in some way. He just seems legitimately frightened, and the fact that he acts this way when he acts so, once again, brave and badass when he's on top of things, but when he's such a sniveling little girl when he's not on top of things, it made that character seem very inconsistent and just kind of unlikable. And I really felt bad for Aaron Eckhart because he's a good actor, but he seems really lost and confused as to how to portray this character. Like, just based on what he's given, is this guy supposed to be more like a normal human who just happens to have, badass abilities? So is he supposed to react like normal people would when they are put in serious danger? Or is he supposed to be something, above your casual human, where he is, just, once again, a kind of brainless, badass, invincible hero? So, unfortunately, Aaron Eckhart doesn't really come out looking good. Even though his performance in itself isn't terrible, the acting in general isn't awful. It's just not very good because I think they really did struggle with the dialogue. And once again, everybody's so dead serious. If you want to say these lines, you have to lighten up a bit so you're not taking yourself so seriously. So that's really all I have to say about the movie. Is it awful? No. But is it good enough to watch? No. It's a bad film, but it's a standard bad film. It's not like The Legend of Hercules, which was like insanely bad in comparison. So I did do a written review. Please read that. I also did written reviews of General Stone, a kung fu movie where the main character is conceived when his mother has sex with a statue, apparently. The Purge, a home invasion flick starring Ethan Hawke. Kidnapped, a Spanish home invasion flick. I think the alternate title is Sequestrados. I could be wrong about that, but read that too. And then Tai Chi Hero, a more modern-day kung fu flick with some steampunk elements. Also, be sure to vote as to what movie franchise I will review during March. There's Best of the Best and The Howling, Puppet Master, the Dragon Ball Z animated movies. Please vote as to what you'd rather see me do. So I guess I should bring this up. I didn't film this on Saturday because I heard that Jew Wario passed away, and his death and the circumstances surrounding it really did kind of depress me. So my sincerest condolences go out to his friends and family and anybody who's affected by his untimely death. It is a very tragic situation, and he seemed like a very cool guy. So that's all I got. I'll see you guys later.